Hey, this is John from Alloy 211. Today's video is on the Marlin Camp Carbine. In particular, this Marlin Camp Carbine, which is a Camp 45. The Marlin Camp Carbine was originally introduced in 1985 in two different models, the Camp 9 and the Camp 45. The Camp 9 using Smith & Wesson's 59 series magazines, and the Camp 45 using 1911 magazines. Now this is actually, let's see if we can get this up to the camera, there we go, a Marlin 1911 magazine, which is kind of cool. Originally introduced in 1985, discontinued in 1999. It's a simple, semi-automatic, blowback operated pistol caliber carbine. If this were to be produced today, it would probably take Glock magazines, but given that it was introduced in 1985 and the 1911 was very common for a semi-automatic 45 at the time, it makes sense that it'd use the 1911 magazines. And the Camp 9 using the Smith & Wesson series 59 magazines makes a lot of sense at the time because that was a very popular semi-automatic 9mm. And not only that, it was popular with a lot of police departments. So if you're hoping to get, say, some service contracts for your carbine and pistol caliber that could use the same magazines as a service firearm, well, that's what you do. The problem is this rifle is really not of a service caliber. Now I've read, and in doing my research on it, I read a lot of different opinions. Many people considered it to be a reliable firearm and didn't have many problems with it. A lot of other people had some other issues with it. And I think when we take it apart and you see some of the fidgety bits inside, you'll understand why it really doesn't quite work out as a service firearm. The lower here, the magazine well and the trigger guard, it's all one piece of polymer plastic. I'm pretty sure it's plastic. But that's really not the most damning part of it as a service firearm. Anyway, overall length is 35.5 inches. Barrel length is 16.5 inches. This one, if you try to get this up here so you can kind of see the sighting, it's got a orange plastic insert, the tip of the front sight, or for the front sight, and just a really basic, honestly very similar to a BB gun back sight on it. It is drilled and tapped for a scope mount, so that's cool. You could put a red dot on it and it'd be pretty serviceable with the red dot, something like that. These sights are okay, they do the job. If you can shoot, you can use them, but they are not what I would call high quality. And that's kind of a lot of this firearm. It's not bad. It was generously lent to me by my brother Kerry, and he said that he put several hundred rounds through it, and it's not in bad shape, but I definitely am a little concerned about some things I saw when I opened it up. So let's go ahead and take it apart. Oh, before I do that, it's got a Garand style safety in the trigger guard here. Forward for fire, back for safe. As you can see, it's slightly removed from the stock already. You've got your magazine release here and a bolt hold open here. Let's get this up where you can see it. Bolt hold open there and your magazine release. I did think this was pretty neat. It's got this little sticker here that says tested and targeted by, and it says Phil B. And that's got a number below it. I'll get that in the camera a little better. There we go. Which I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's the coolest thing, but I think the coolest thing, honestly, is it is a very short, very handy rifle. And if it functions and everything is good on it, then I would say it would be a very nice firearm. Now, do I think it's a bad firearm? No. But do I think it's anything more than a plinking firearm? After I took it apart, not really. I really do think it's more of just something that you would use for plinking. And we'll take a look at the accessories catalog there in a moment. I've already loosened these screws, so that way I didn't have to use a screwdriver on camera. It has two pins. Get this where you can see it a little better. It's got two pins, one here in the back, one here in the front, that hold the lower receiver in place. We'll go ahead, get this back down. Well, there you go, where you can see it, or there where you can see it. Let me zoom out a little. There we go. And you go ahead and take a punch, and you want to make sure you have the bolt closed. This is a simple blowback firearm. I don't know if I mentioned that. I think I did. Either way, it doesn't actually lock, it's just blowback. But you do want to make sure the bolt is forward before you push the pins out, because if you don't, then when you push the pins out, the bolt will snap forward. We don't want that. And as I wrinkle up the cloth below it, okay, there the pins are out. Now you can just pull the lower receiver out, like so. Here's one of the little fidgety bits that I was talking about that I'm not so thrilled with. Anyway, pretty standard blowback bolt. There's the bolt handle and the recoil spring and the guide rod, and all the guts of it fall out. The bolt handle, how about I put it on the right way, sits on there just like that. It's pretty simple. You have a hammer and the lower receiver here. Your hammer, and like I said, this is plastic, but then it's reinforced up here at the top with steel. And after looking at this, I really thought, you know, you could almost come in here later on and redesign this to have some sort of a mount where you could actually put in a different magazine well, possibly, you know, extend the metal down to say here maybe. I don't know for sure, but I would definitely say you could rework this action in some way to say take lock magazines. Now, do I think that's worth it? After I kind of dug into the gun a little more, not so much. One of the big complaints I heard or read about, I don't want to say heard, read about, was this buffer back here. Now, this is a blowback operated semi-automatic firearm, and honestly this bolt is really not that heavy, especially when you think about 9mm or 45, 9mm more given the increased bolt velocity. So it's really pretty light, and the hammer spring is actually pretty light as well. Not that you, well, I mean, you could do that. You could have a stronger hammer spring and it would slow the bolt some more, but that's really not the way to do that. It does have this buffer in the back, which that's a big thing I read about, and a lot of the problems with reliability is this buffer coming apart after a few hundred rounds. And like I said, my brother had let me borrow this for the video, and he said that he had only fired a few hundred rounds out of it. Try to get it on camera. And you can see it is starting to come apart right here. It's starting to get worn out, and it does probably need a new one. And if you really look at it, it may be kind of hard to see on camera, but it looks kind of compressed and even off center. And not that this is a big deal, but this is something that kind of bothers me too on not just this firearm, but a lot of the blowback operated pistol caliber firearms, and that's that it has an asymmetric recoil spring. And not that, and it's not a big deal. A lot of guns have used this design, it works fine, but when you look at this buffer, it definitely looks like it's been impacted more on this side than the side where the recoil spring is. And it does make me wonder if maybe that asymmetric movement of the bolt is allowing it to impact more onto this side than that side. Either way, obviously that buffer is kind of starting to go out. But the most fidgety bit that I found on this whole thing that I really did not like, you can kind of see it now, try to get in the frame, is, let me get this screwdriver here, this little tiny spring right here, this little guy. When I took this apart, this spring was bent forward to about where the pin hole is, right there. And when I'd read about this firearm online, no one really mentioned that spring. And that spring is a pain in the butt, because this rides in here, right like that. And when you go to put the lower receiver back on, this wants to move back here. Oh, let me kind of move it to there. Right to there, where this lip right here wants to catch on the top of that spring. And if you try to just push it forward as you're putting it together, then it catches the spring and pushes it forward, so it's not actually acting on that the way it's intended to. And the reason why that kind of becomes an issue is because of this feed ramp right here. It's kind of hard to do this when it's so zoomed in. Anyway, this feed ramp right here, when you put this gun back together, has to be right here. It has to be at the back of the barrel. But where it wants to sit is right here. It wants to just catch on that lip. So as you're putting it back together, which I'll show you here in a minute, and you swing this down into place, you have to make sure that you're pushing that feed ramp back so it's behind just the bottom edge of the barrel. And that becomes a pain when you're also trying to keep this little guy in place, which I found. Anyway, go ahead and put it back together here. And I'll show you how I did it, and hopefully that makes it a little easier for you. And also, I was looking through the owner's manual. Now when I received the firearm, the pins were in this way. But when I was looking through the handy owner's manual that was included, which really appreciated all of the stuff that he allowed me to borrow at the same time, which is this. When I was looking, it showed the pins going in the other way with the flat head here on the outside rather than on that side. So that will make it a little bit easier to do this, but it's still not that easy to do. Anyway, let's go ahead and start putting it back together. Recoil spring goes into the back of the bolt. It's a nice asymmetric location. Push that kind of down. I like to do that, and then I'll put the charging handle in. There we go. It's down and in there. It's good. Okay, and now put this fiddly bit here. Now let's zoom back in there. There we go. Put this little bit here in there, making sure it's on top of the spring where it belongs. Now, take the lower receiver, get down on my knee here like I'm proposing to it, because hopefully it goes in and doesn't cause me a big pain in the butt. Because you know, that's what you always want when you're on camera, to have to struggle with it when you're on camera. I mean, that's nice when you've done it 4 or 5 times off camera and it's great and it's good. Oh, you know, it helped if I were putting it in the right way. Yep, see, there you go. Anyway, it helps if you are to put the back of the lower receiver into the back of the upper receiver. That is really helpful. That is not a fidgety bit of the firearm. Oh, as you can see, that wanted to slide right back there. That's not a fidgety bit of the firearm. That is me trying to do this on camera and screwing it up royally. Anyway, now that we've gotten it the right way, go ahead and start this pin in. And that's kind of what it showed in the owner's manual, from what I could see as you start it. And now I'm going to use the screwdriver, not pushing back on the receiver, just pushing back on the feed ramp. And that one to pop right back out. There we go. Just pushing back on the feed ramp in order to get it to the edge of the barrel. I'm going to bring this up here and hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. Get a light. Then see the light washes out what I'm trying to look at. There you go. As you can see, the feed ramp there is got a spring in it, and it is at the back. It's kind of hard to see down in there, but it is at the back. I'm trying to get this better. Well, it is just disappears. There we go. It is right there at the back of the barrel. Like I said, that is a pain in the butt to do. We got it done. Then the stock just very simply goes back on. And I am not going to use this undersized screwdriver to tighten these down. I am just kind of tightening them into place just to hold it together. I will come back with a better screwdriver later to do that. Now, as you can see, there are quite a few little bits and pieces in there that kind of make it a pain for disassembly or reassembly. And really, a lot of failure points in the design, especially for just a pretty simple blowback operated firearm. And I've only ever owned a Kel-Tec Sub 2000 that I can compare to this as for a pistol caliber carbine. And I can really say, although the Sub 2000 is a very simple design, and mine was a 9mm, I don't know if I'd want one in 40, but my 9mm functioned and was a good gun. but it was a much simpler design than this, and it seemed to be, even though simpler, more robust. And that's not saying a lot if you've owned a Kel-Tec Sub 2000, and nothing against the gun. I never had any problems with it, and it functioned fine, and I shot quite a few rounds through it, and I enjoyed it. So, do I think that it was a better gun than this firearm? I think probably. Anyway, something I did want to show as well was the accessory catalog here. And one of the things I thought that was amazing, or not amazing, but kind of like, wow, I can't believe how expensive that is. For the 7-round Marlin 1911 magazine, it was $31. And that is pretty pricey, especially when you think about how much a 1911 magazine costs now. But it also made me think about something, and I remember when I was younger, it seemed like 1911 magazines always had problems, never functioned correctly, and it was hard to find good functioning 1911 magazines. So maybe that was part of it behind it. And, you know, a lot of people might wonder why this was discontinued in 1999. Part of it really has to do with it just didn't sell very well. Pistol caliber carbines kind of wane and ebb in their popularity. So especially one that has such niche magazines. I guess 1911 isn't, but definitely the Smith & Wesson Series 59 is kind of a lesser used semi-automatic pistol nowadays. And even at that point, Smith & Wesson, I believe, discontinued that series in 1999. So that may even contributed to why Marlin decided to just cancel the series. And Marlin, honestly, was kind of going through a lot of different, you know, ups and downs around this time. And still kind of is. And, you know, I don't want to say anything bad about the company because I've not owned one of their firearms. I've never owned one of their firearms, but I haven't owned or shot a newer one, but I've heard a lot of disparaging things about quality control lately with Marlin. But anyway, I do think this is an interesting firearm, and if you get a chance to shoot one or handle one, you should. It's definitely a plinking gun, and I would say, you know, you replaced, say, the buffer and the recoil spring, and maybe that little fidgety spring up here, and you would have a really fun plinking, just to take, you know, if you have a large amount of property, take it with you for vermin control. It's not a bad firearm, but is it something that's rough and tumble and you can beat up? I don't really think so, but it is handy. So if you're in the market for something like this, they are going up in price from what I could see, but also in the same stroke, if you're in the market for this, you're in the market for, say, a sub 2000 or a high point, and I can't honestly say there's any reason to go with this over one of those. So anyway, I'm sure some people will be annoyed by that, but it's a cool gun, don't get me wrong, but I think there are better options available. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you watched some of my other videos and you enjoyed those too, I'd really appreciate if you subscribed. Thanks, and have a good day.